Okay, let's move on to metaphors. Metaphors are great fun. They're stories, aren't they? And stories are great fun. I would say that metaphors are telling stories. And they're telling if you're into metaphors. Metaphors are about telling stories. The purpose of a metaphor is to pace and lead a client's behaviour through a story. The major points of construction of a metaphor are displacing the referential index of the story. The referential index is the person that the story refers to, so this would be changing the main character in the story from the client to a character in the story. Pacing the client's problem by establishing behaviours and events in the story that are similar to those events in the client's situation. Accessing resources for the client within the context of the story and finishing the story such that a sequence of events occurs and that the characters in the story resolve the problem and reach their desired outcome. Now, that entire process is really simple to do, and that was the big picture. We're going to get more detailed in a moment. First of all, let me just tell you a little story. When I was selling health insurance, I used to tell my clients a story at the beginning of the meeting. And it was a story about why I did what I did. And it involved another client that I had who explained to me why he'd decided to take out health insurance with me. He'd told me that he had a friend that lived life to the full and enjoyed spending his money as he earned it, which is a great way to live, I think. And one day he was snowboarding in France, and he was on a mountainside and he was looking at the clear blue skies, just taking in the scenery and the pristine slopes in front of him, when all of a sudden he got mowed down from behind. Somebody ran straight into him. And he woke up several days later in a hospital in Grenoble in France. And as he woke up, the first thing that he saw was the doctor's face, and the doctor was asking him if he had any insurance. He obviously wanted paying for the treatment that he'd had. And he learnt that he'd suffered a bang to the head and that it had left him with severe concussion. Anyway, fortunately he had taken out travel insurance, so his medical needs were covered. When he got home several weeks later, he was still unable to walk, and after he'd told his boss that he would be unable to return to his driving job for several months, he was contemplating life without an income. Now, this fella had a mortgage, a wife, 2 very young kids, so he had a lot to lose. Thoughts of having to sell the house and rely on state benefits were, frankly, filling him with dread, so just the cost of food these days is frightening. And then he remembered that he'd got a financial advisor, and that was me. Hadn't he got some insurance for this type of thing? Well, fortunately, he'd called me up and I explained that, yeah, we had this event covered and that we'd be able to replace his income from work until he was well enough to return. Anyway, this client, when he'd heard this story from his friend, he rang me up straight away and he took out a policy the next day in order to give himself that peace of mind. It's just not worth the risk of not having it, he told me. And that's why I do what I do, I'd explain to people, to give people the peace of mind and security.